All right, welcome back everyone for another Duck Dive. Today we're going all the way to Colombia.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, it should be good.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at this really complex situation, how the country is treating its veterans,
Okay.
particularly ones that are called veteran victims.
I see.
And there's this proposal to provide health care to former terrorists, and that's really stirring things up over there.
Oh, wow. So this is a big deal.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Because it kind of brings up all these questions about what it means to be a hero,
Right.
a villain, and how a nation comes to terms with, all the baggage from its past.
Yeah, that's heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So our main source for this dive is an excerpt from this academic paper by Rafael R. Patarroyo.
Right.
And he's not just an armchair scholar,
Right.
he's actually a Colombian army veteran.
Oh, wow. So he's got firsthand experience with all of this.
Exactly.
That's really valuable.
So he brings this super valuable insider perspective, he's seen the conflict,
Yeah. Right.
felt the impact personally.
Hmm.
And that's got to shape his analysis in a way that, just reading legal frameworks or political arguments can't,
Yeah, absolutely. You can't get that kind of depth from just reading about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that human cost, those moral dilemmas, that's what really gets me.
Yeah, I get that. It's the human side of things that often gets lost.
Right.
Yeah.
And the big dilemma here, the one that's really tearing people apart,
Okay.
is should Colombia be providing health care to former terrorists
Oh, wow.
right alongside the soldiers who fought against them?
That's a tough one.
It is, yeah.
Don't they?
So we're talking about people who literally took up arms against their own government, committed acts of violence,
Right.
and now they're potentially getting the same benefits as the very people who risk their lives to protect their country.
I see what you mean about it being complex. I mean, just thinking about trying to reconcile
Right.
all of those different perspectives and experiences. Yeah, that's really tough.
And the fact that it's even being considered really says a lot about how, messed up Colombia's path to peace and reconciliation has been.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It forces us to confront some really uncomfortable questions about justice, forgiveness,
Right.
and what it actually takes to move on after decades of conflict.
And to really wrap our heads around the intensity of this whole debate,
Mm-hmm.
we kind of have to go back to 1997 to this event that Patarroyo keeps coming back to.
Go.
The Pataske Massacre.
Oh, I've heard of that. That was a horrific event.
It was. It wasn't just a battle,
Oh.
This was a full-on brutal attack by FARC terrorists.
Right, the FARC. For those who might not know, they were a guerrilla group, right?
Mhm.
And they fought against the Colombian government for, what was it, like 50 years?
Yeah, over 50 years.
A long time.
A long time.
And they were responsible for a lot of the violence that plagued the country.
Yeah, a lot of kidnappings, bombings, attacks on civilians. I mean, they left a real deep scar on Colombian society.
Yeah, that's what I remember reading, too. They were brutal.
And Pataskoy, oh man, it's
Yeah.
one of the most brutal examples.
Really puts it into perspective.
10 Colombian soldiers just ambushed and massacred.
It's hard to even imagine.
Yeah, and another soldier was taken captive and held for 13 years, only to be executed at the end.
Oh, God. 13 years.
I mean, that trauma, you can't even describe it.
It makes sense why that event would be so central to this discussion.
Totally. And for so many Colombians, especially the veterans and their families,
Of course.
this whole idea of providing health care to former FARC members,
Yeah.
it just rips open those wounds,
That makes sense. It must feel like a betrayal. Like all those sacrifices they made are just being ignored now.
It's like all of that is being swept under the rug, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like it never even happened.
And then it gets worse because Patarroyo talks about this incident from 1998.
What happened?
Wounded FARC guerrillas, the very people behind attacks like Pataskoy,
Right.
were treated at the military hospital
No way.
alongside the soldiers they were trying to kill.
Wow.
Seriously.
So they were in the same hospital receiving the same treatment as the people they were fighting against.
Yep. He calls it the insult, and I totally get it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I can't even imagine how those veterans must have felt seeing their attackers getting the same care they were.
Yeah, a slap in the face.
Talk about a slap in the face.
And you know what? It planted the seed of distrust and resentment that's still there today.
I bet. And now with this new proposal, it's like history is repeating itself.
It is.
Yeah. I can see why so many Colombians are uneasy about all of this. It's like they're offering comfort to the very people who caused them so much pain.
It is. And then you throw this whole veteran victims category into the mix and, well,
Yeah, what is that all about?
well, These are Colombian veterans who served their country,
Okay.
got injured,
Right.
but they get absolutely zero financial or healthcare benefits from the government.
Zero. But they were injured while serving. How is that even possible?
It's a mess, honestly. It really highlights how broken Colombia's veteran support system is. There's this really rigid disability rating system.
Okay.
So if a veteran's disability is rated at 49%,
Hmm.
they get nothing. Nada.
Really? Just 1 percentage point away.
But here's the kicker. If they hit 50%,
Okay.
just 1 percentage point more, then they qualify for benefits.
Wow. So someone who dedicated years of their life, put themselves in harm's way for their country, could be denied basic health care because of a single percentage point.
It's nuts, right?
That's wild.
And it's like the system is saying, you haven't suffered enough.
It's just heartbreaking. It shows how these bureaucratic systems just fail to grasp the human cost of all of this.
Totally. And for those veteran victims, that single percentage point can be the difference between getting the support they desperately need and
Right.
being totally abandoned.
Jeez. And what makes it even worse is that, according to Patarroyo, the law itself puts the responsibility for veteran care on the individual branches of the military.
You're kidding.
Nope. So basically, veterans are at the mercy of their specific branch,
Wow.
which means their access to care and benefits can vary wildly.
So it's like a lottery.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of veterans end up feeling abandoned by the very institution they dedicated their lives to.
It's a total mess. So on one hand, you have these veteran victims struggling to get basic health care.
Yeah.
And on the other, there's this proposal to provide care to the FARC, the group that caused so much pain. No wonder people in Colombia are outraged.
Yeah, I can see that. It's like a double insult.
It goes beyond just healthcare, though. Patarroyo argues that this whole proposal is part of a bigger problem, erasing the sacrifices made by soldiers and police in the fight against terrorism.
That's a good point, like their efforts are being minimized or forgotten.
Exactly. And he goes so far as to say that the terrorists have, in a way, won.
One, in what sense?
He's saying that by letting former FARC members reintegrate into society, hold political offices,
Right.
and now potentially receive health care alongside their former enemies, Colombia is basically normalizing their actions.
That's a really provocative argument, like
Yeah.
saying, hey, all that violence you inflicted, water under the bridge.
Exactly. And that's got to be a hard pill to swallow, especially for those who are directly affected.
Of course.
Mhm.
It raises a big question about forgiveness and reconciliation.
Yeah, can you truly reconcile with people who committed atrocities without acknowledging the full weight of their actions? Can you just move on without any sort of accountability?
Really makes you think.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's all the terminology Patarroyo uses to categorize those involved in the conflict. Active, inactive, retroactive, reactive, proactive, and accepted veterans. It's a mouthful, but it shows how difficult it is to even define who's a veteran in a war as messy as Colombia's.
Right. It's not so black and white. And then at
Right.
the core of it all is Patarroyo's statement that people don't fundamentally change.
What does he say?
He says, a terrorist will always be a terrorist. A police officer will always be a police officer, a soldier, a soldier. Their past actions, that's what defines them, he says.
So is he saying that forgiveness and reconciliation are impossible in a situation like this?
It's definitely a question that hangs over this whole debate.
Absolutely.
Can a society truly heal when those who caused harm are treated the same as those who defended it?
It's a huge ethical dilemma, and it's something Colombia is struggling with right now.
So we have this clash between the need for peace and the demand for justice.
Right. Like two sides of the same coin.
Exactly.
How do you even begin to address all of that? Yeah, it's a real head scratcher, right? Like you need honesty about what happened to truly heal, to even start acknowledging the wrongs. But
Yeah.
can you really do that when the victims feel like
Yeah.
everyone's just trying to forget about their suffering?
It's like all those sacrifices just vanish.
Yeah, exactly.
It reminds me of those Truth and Reconciliation Commissions they had in South Africa.
Oh, yeah, after apartheid.
Yeah, and one of the big questions they wrestled with was how do you forgive someone
Right.
when they won't even admit they did anything wrong?
It's a good question. And like in Colombia, have we even reached that point where those responsible are actually asking for forgiveness?
Right. Are they even remorseful?
Yeah. And if not, how do you move on? How do you prevent the same violence from happening again?
And it's not just some philosophical debate either.
Right. It's about real people
Real people. Yeah, families who are still dealing with the consequences.
For sure.
Like Patarroyo, he's not just some academic.
Right.
He's a veteran himself.
He's been there in the trenches.
He knows the horrors firsthand.
That's got to lend a whole different weight to his words.
It does, yeah. Seeing your comrades killed and injured, and then to feel like their sacrifice is being ignored.
Tough to swallow.
It is. So we have this poll. On one side, you need peace and reconciliation, but then there's the need for justice, recognizing the victims.
It's a tightrope walk. One misstep and it all falls apart.
Definitely, yeah. And this isn't just a Colombian problem, is it?
Not at all, unfortunately.
Hmm.
It's something lots of countries are struggling with.
When you have civil wars, genocide, all of that.
All that baggage.
Yeah.
How do you heal, but also make sure those who did terrible things are held accountable?
Yeah.
How do you move on without pretending the past didn't happen?
It's such a huge question, and there's no one-size-fits-all answer.
Nope. Every situation is different.
Yeah.
The key, I think, is not jumping to conclusions or making things too simple. These are deeply held beliefs and traumas on all sides.
I see that. Petaroy is passionate about veterans getting the support they need.
Right.
But he's also grappling with this big question. How does Colombia, as a country, deal with its past, all that violence?
He's challenging us to really think about what justice means, what reconciliation should look like, and how a society can truly heal.
And the stakes are so high, right? If Colombia doesn't step up for its veterans.
Yeah. If they force reconciliation without dealing with the past,
what then?
You risk more division, more violence, passing that trauma down through generations.
Scary thought.
It is, it is.
But Patarroyo's work, even if it's controversial, makes us confront these hard truths. Right. And that's better than ignoring them, letting them fester.
For sure, for sure. He's asking us what a peaceful future for Colombia would even look like and how to get there.
So where does this leave us? We've talked about this complex situation, from Patarroyo's perspective, all these ethical and societal issues.
It's a lot. So the big question remains, what's next? What's the way forward?
That's the way forward.
If only I had a simple answer.
Right.
But what we can do is keep having these conversations, keep listening to those most affected, try to find solutions that actually bring justice and healing.
It's huge, yeah. But if Colombia can navigate this, it could show other countries how to deal with conflict and division.
That's a great point, and that's where you come in, listener.
Yeah.
This isn't just some abstract debate in a faraway place. It's about how we think about justice, forgiveness, in our own communities, even in our own lives.
This is real-life stuff.
It is.
Real lives, real families still carrying the scars of war, and what Colombia chooses to do will affect generations to come.
Think for a second, you're a family member of one of those soldiers killed in the Pirasoy massacre.
Oh, wow.
How would you feel knowing the people responsible are getting health care at the same hospital your loved one was treated in?
It's unimaginable.
It really is, that feeling of betrayal.
Yeah.
And that's why we can't shy away from these issues, from these tough questions. The decisions made today, they're going to shape Colombia's future and how we as a global society deal with conflict and violence.
I mean, what are they saying to those veterans, especially the veteran victims, who can't even get basic health care?
It's a tough message.
If they're willing to give benefits to former terrorists, what does that say about their sacrifice,
It's almost like saying their service didn't matter.
Right.
That their suffering is just being ignored.
Like it sends this message that some victims are more important than others.
Yeah. And how can you expect people to buy into reconciliation when that's going on?
Exactly. You can't build trust. You can't heal when it feels like those who caused the pain are getting rewarded.
You're right. While those who were hurt are left behind.
It's a feeling of injustice that sticks around, doesn't it?
For sure. For generations even.
So back to healthcare for former terrorists.
Yep.
If the goal is peace, reconciliation, is this really the best way?
It's a big question. No easy answers.
Right.
But any path forward has to put the victims first.
All of them.
All of them,
Yeah.
not just a select few.
Exactly. And that means physical, emotional healing, sure.
Yeah.
But also a sense of justice.
Acknowledging what happened.
Absolutely. And that includes the sacrifices of the Colombian soldiers and police.
Right. They put their lives on the line.
They did, and their stories need to be told.
I can't forget them.
We can't. And their needs need to be met, too.
Absolutely. Ignoring them would be so wrong.
It would be. You have to find a way to balance peace and justice. It's a tough balancing act, for sure.
It is like a complicated equation.
And each piece affects real people.
That's the thing. It's not just numbers. It's lives.
But if they can find that balance, honor the victims, and find a way to reconcile,
It'd be huge.
it would. Maybe a model for other countries to follow.
Definitely a real beacon of hope.
So wrapping up, we've gone deep on Colombia,
Mm-hmm.
heard Patarroyo's take, all these moral and societal questions,
Yeah.
and it feels like a huge task, what they're facing.
It is, but there's hope too.
There is.
That by facing these issues, listening to everyone, prioritizing justice and healing,
Yeah,
a brighter future is possible.
it is. That's the key takeaway.
Isn't it? Even when things seem impossible, even with the worst of history,
Hmm.
there's always that chance for redemption, for reconciliation, for making things better.
Powerful thought.
It is.
Thanks for being with us on this deep dive into Colombia.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll be back next week with another look at a complex and fascinating topic. But until then, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep striving for a more just and compassionate world.